Welcome back. You are listening to the home of forbidden romances. Prepare yourself, because tonight's story will leave you breathless. The crystal flute shattered against the wall, the sound echoing like a gunshot through the silent ballroom, signaling the end of civilization and the beginning of a slaughter. It happened in a heartbeat. One moment, the gala was a symphony of polite laughter and clinking glasses. The next, Julian Vane, the ruthless CEO of Vane Heavy Industries, had his hand wrapped around his fiancée's throat, lifting the man off the ground as if he weighed nothing more than a rag doll. The terrified guests gasped, retreating against the gilded walls, but Julian's eyes weren't on the man choking in his grip. They were locked on the trembling, soaked figure kneeling amidst the shards of broken champagne glasses near the entrance. A boy who smelled like ozone and rain. A boy who shouldn't exist. 3 hours earlier, the night had been suffocatingly perfect. The Vane estate sat atop the city's highest hill, a monolith of black marble and glass that looked down upon the sprawling metropolis like a judge. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of expensive perfumes and the underlying, metallic tang of suppressants. It was the engagement party of the century. Julian Vane, the alpha whose pheromones were rumored to be strong enough to force a room to its knees, was officially binding himself to Silas Thorne, a highborn omega from a rival manufacturing family. It was a merger, not a marriage. Julian stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, nursing a whiskey he hadn't touched. He was a man carved from ice, tall, with broad shoulders that strained against his bespoke charcoal suit, and eyes the color of tempered steel. He felt nothing. For years, Julian had suffered from a rare condition known as olfactory dormancy. He couldn't smell pheromones. To him, the world was gray, scentless, and dull. He felt no attraction, no heat, no instinct. Just cold logic. "You look like you're at a funeral, darling," Silas purred, sliding an arm through Julian's. Silas was beautiful in the conventional sense, delicate features, platinum hair, and a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. He was also cruel, a trait Julian tolerated because it required no emotional investment to manage. "Ideally, I would be," Julian replied, his voice a low baritone that vibrated in the air. "At least the conversation would be quieter." Silas giggled, a sharp, brittle sound. "Oh, cheer up. I have a surprise for you. A little entertainment. I found something heavily amusing from my university days. A little rat that used to think he was better than me." Julian checked his watch, ignoring him. "I don't have time for your petty vendettas, Silas." "You'll want to see this," Silas insisted, his eyes gleaming with malice. "I ordered a special package. VIP delivery directly to the ballroom," I told the dispatch. I offered a tip large enough to make a beggar crawl through glass. Julian turned away, bored. He didn't care about the games the idle rich played with the working class. It was beneath him. Outside, the storm was raging. Kieran shivered as he parked his battered scooter at the service gate, only to be directed to the main entrance by a sneering guard. "VIP delivery," the ticket said. The tip promised 500 credits, enough to pay for his suppressor medication for 3 months. For that amount, Kieran would walk through hell. He adjusted his helmet, water dripping down his neck. He was small, his frame hidden beneath a neon yellow courier jacket that was 2 sizes too big. Underneath the helmet, his face was pale, his eyes large and dark, framed by lashes that caught the raindrops like jewels. He touched his throat subconsciously, a habit he had developed over the last 5 years. There was a jagged, silvery scar running across his vocal cords. He hadn't spoken a word since the night the Ashworth family fell. He was mute. A mute, destitute omega living in the slums. A ghost of a person. He walked up the marble stairs, the heavy oak doors groaning open. The warmth of the ballroom hit him, followed by the heavy, cloying pressure of 100 high-status alphas and omegas. He felt instantly dizzy. He shouldn't be here. This was a predator's den. He's here. Silas's voice cut through the hum of the room. The music stopped. The crowd parted. Kieran stood dripping on the pristine floor, clutching a small, damp cardboard box. He kept his head down, offering the package with trembling hands to a nearby waiter, but Silas stepped forward. "No, no," Silas announced, grabbing a microphone from the stage. The instructions were clear. Hand delivery to the host. Kieran froze. He recognized that voice. The memories assaulted him. High school, the bullying, the way Silas had locked him in the gym equipment locker for 2 days. Kieran's breath hitched. He wanted to run, but his legs felt like lead. He needed the money. He stepped forward, water squelching in his worn sneakers. "Look at him," Silas laughed, gesturing to the elite crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to introduce Kieran Ashworth." You remember the name? The prestigious Ashworth family? Now look. A mute little delivery rat. Murmurs broke out. Asterisk Ashworth? The family that was accused of embezzlement and vanished? Asterisk. Julian, who had his back turned, stiffened at the name. "Ashworth. Come on, rat," Silas taunted, snapping his fingers. "Bring it here. And take that ridiculous helmet off. Let everyone see how far the mighty have fallen." Kieran hesitated. Silas's expression darkened. He strode forward and slapped the helmet off Kieran's head. It clattered loudly onto the floor. Kieran flinched, his dark hair plastered to his forehead, his eyes wide with terror. He looked small, broken, and heartbreakingly beautiful in his misery. "Kneel," Silas commanded, enjoying the power trip. "Hand it to me on your knees, and maybe I'll double the tip." The crowd laughed nervously. They were accustomed to cruelty, but this felt raw. Kieran's pride had been ground to dust years ago. He slowly bent his knees, lowering himself to the marble. He held up the box. "Oops," Silas sneered. He kicked Kieran's hand. The box flew into the air. Kieran lost his balance and fell forward, his palms landing on the jagged remains of a champagne flute dropped by a startled guest. Glass sliced into his skin. Blood, bright red and startling, welled up on the white floor. And then, the scent hit. It happened in a split second. The stress, the fear, and the physical pain caused Kieran's cheap scent blockers to fail. A wave of pheromones exploded from his small body. It wasn't the cloying, sweet scent of a typical Omega. It was cool, crisp, and devastating. It smelled like white freesia and deep ocean rain. Across the room, Julian Vane dropped his glass. For the first time in 10 years, Julian smelled something. It didn't just register. It slammed into him like a freight train. The scent tore through his dormancy, igniting nerve endings he thought were dead. It was a scent that screamed mine. It was the scent of the boy who had dragged him out of a burning warehouse when they were children. The boy he had searched for. The boy he was told had died in the fire. The gray world shattered. Color returned in a violent rush of red. Julian turned. His vision tunneled. He saw Silas raise a hand to strike Kieran again, mocking the boy's silence. "Filthy mute. You ruined the FL." Crack. The sound of the glass breaking was the intro. The sound of Julian moving was the hook. He covered the distance in a blur of motion that no human eye could track. Julian slammed into Silas, his hand clamping around his fiancée's throat, lifting him into the air. The room erupted in screams. "You!" Julian growled, his voice a terrifying rumble that vibrated the chandeliers. His eyes were glowing a faint, predatory gold. "Did you touch him?" Silas clawed at Julian's hand, his face turning purple. "Julian." "What?" Julian threw Silas aside like garbage. He didn't care if the man lived or died. He turned to the figure on the floor. The room fell deadly silent. The pressure radiating from Julian was suffocating, an alpha aura so potent that weaker guests fainted. It was a command, *submit. Leave. Or die, *. Kieran was curled in a ball, clutching his bleeding hand, shaking violently. He expected a blow. He expected to be thrown out. Instead, he saw polished black shoes stop before him. Julian dropped to his knees. The great Julian Vane, the king of industry, kneeling in the wet mud and broken glass. He reached out, his hand hovering over Kieran, trembling slightly. "Kieran," Julian whispered. Kieran looked up. His eyes were filled with tears, pupils dilated with fear. He didn't recognize the man. Julian had changed so much since childhood, but his inner Omega whined. The scent of cedarwood and smoke enveloped him, wrapping around his soul like a shield. "Don't touch me," Kieran mouthed silently, flinching back. The rejection, silent as it was, cut Julian deeper than a knife. He saw the scar on Kieran's throat. A cold, murderous rage settled in his chest. Someone had done this. Someone had taken the boy's voice. "I'm not going to hurt you," Julian said, his voice dropping to a gentle rumble that confused everyone watching. He took off his tuxedo jacket, heedless of the blood on his white shirt, and draped it over Kieran's soaking shoulders. "I've got you, Julian," Silas shrieked from the floor, gasping for air. "What are you doing?" "That is a servant. A mute cripple. He's ruining our party." Julian didn't look back. "The engagement is off." "What?" Silas screamed. "You can't. My father will." "If your father wants to keep his company," Julian said, scooping Kieran up into his arms, bridal style, "he will ensure you never speak again. Because if I hear your voice one more time, I will rip your tongue out to match what was done to him." The threat was delivered with such calm certainty that Silas went pale and silent. Kieran was stiff in Julian's arms, too shocked to struggle. He held his bleeding hand to his chest, staining Julian's shirt. The warmth radiating from the alpha was intoxicating. For the first time in years, the cold ache in his bones began to recede. "Call the doctor," Julian barked at his head of security as he strode toward the exit. "And clear this room. If anyone took a photo, destroy their phone. If anyone speaks of this, destroy their career." The penthouse suite of the Vane estate was a fortress of solitude. Outside, the storm battered the glass. Inside, the silence was heavy, but no longer hostile. Julian sat on the edge of the velvet sofa. Kieran sat on the other end, wrapped in a thick blanket, his hand bandaged. A private doctor had come and gone, stitching the wound and administering a high-grade nutrient shot. Kieran looked better, though still pale. He stared at Julian warily. He pulled a notepad from his pocket, his lifeline. He scribbled quickly and held it up. "Why?" Julian poured a glass of water and placed it on the table, pushing it toward Kieran. "Because you smell like rain," Julian said simply. "And because I have been looking for you for 15 years. Kieran frowned. He wrote again. "I don't know you." Julian leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "Do you remember the warehouse? The kidnapping? You were 10. I was 12. Kieran's pen paused. His eyes widened. The memory was a nightmare he tried to suppress. Fire, smoke, a boy tied to a chair. Kieran had sneaked in through a vent, cut the ropes with a shard of glass, and dragged the older boy out. In the process, a falling beam had crushed Kieran's throat. He stared at Julian. "The cold CEO. Was the boy in the chair?" "You were the boy," Kieran wrote, his hand shaking. "I thought you died," Julian said, his voice rough. "When I woke up in the hospital, my father told me the rescuers found no one else. They told me I imagined you. The trauma? It made me forget faces. It made me lose my sense of smell. Until tonight." Julian reached out, slowly, giving Kieran time to pull away. When Kieran didn't, Julian gently brushed a strand of damp hair from Kieran's forehead. "Who did this to you, Kieran? Who ruined your family? Who took your voice?" Kieran looked down. He wrote a name. "Thorn. Silas's family." Julian read the name, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. The puzzle pieces clicked into place. The Thorn family had risen to power right as the Ashworths fell. They hadn't just embezzled. They had framed Kieran's father, driven them to ruin, and likely orchestrated the accident that silenced Kieran to prevent him from testifying about the kidnapping. Silas knew, Julian murmured, a dark realization dawning on him. "He invited you tonight not just to mock you, but to show me how broken you were, thinking I wouldn't recognize you. He wanted to parade his victory." Julian stood up. He walked to the window, looking out at the city lights. The alpha in him was roaring for blood, demanding retribution. But the man in him knew he needed to be strategic. He needed to be cruel. "Kieran," Julian said, turning back. "I made a mistake tonight." Kieran flinched, gripping the blanket. "He's going to kick me out," he thought. "Now that he's saved me, he's realized I'm too much trouble." "My mistake," Julian continued, walking back to the sofa and kneeling on the floor again, placing himself lower than Kieran, "was thinking that I needed a marriage for business. I don't." He took Kieran's uninjured hand. "I need a partner who understands survival. I need someone who saved my life when I was nothing." Julian's thumb stroked Kieran's knuckles. "Stay here. Let me protect you. Let me give you the world that was stolen from you." Kieran stared at him. It was a fairy tale offer, but Kieran was a realist. He pulled his hand back and wrote, "I am mute. I am poor. I am an omega. I cannot be by your side. They will eat me alive. Julian read the note and smiled. A genuine, dangerous smile that transformed his face from cold stone to something devastatingly handsome. "Let them try," Julian said. "You don't need to speak, Kieran. You just need to point. Point at who you want destroyed, and I will burn them to the ground. You are not weak. You survived hell. Now, let me be your voice." The next morning, the headlines were chaotic, but by noon, they had vanished. Vane Industries controlled the narrative. However, a different kind of storm was brewing in the boardroom of Thorn Manufacturing. Stocks were plummeting. Contracts were being canceled. And at the center of it was a video, leaked anonymously, of Silas Thorn mocking a disabled courier, followed by his admission of prior abuse. Julian walked into his office, looking fresh, sharp, and terrifying. He sat at his desk, where Kieran was sitting in the oversized leather chair, looking small but clean, wearing a soft cashmere sweater that belonged to Julian. Kieran looked up, anxiety in his eyes. "It's done," Julian said, placing a file on the desk. "The Thorn family is under investigation for corporate espionage and the old embezzlement charges regarding your father's company. My lawyers found the buried evidence." Kieran reached for the file. His eyes scanned the documents. His family's name. Cleared. The Thorn family. Ruined. He looked at Julian. The alpha was leaning against the desk, watching him with an intensity that made Kieran's heart race. "Why go this far?" Kieran sighed. He had learned ASL years ago, and Julian had spent the entire night learning the basics. "Because," Julian signed back, his movements clumsy but sincere, "you are my mate." Kieran froze. The word hung in the air. Mate. Julian walked around the desk. He spun the chair, so Kieran faced him. He placed his hands on the armrests, trapping Kieran, but not touching him. "I won't force a bond," Julian said softly. "But I won't let you go either. You can hate me. You can use me. You can take my money and my power and use it to rebuild your empire. But you will do it from here. From my side." Kieran looked at the man who had once been a frightened boy in a fire. He saw the same determination. He saw the loneliness that matched his own. Slowly, tentatively, Kieran reached out. He placed his hand on Julian's chest, right over his heart. He could feel it beating, strong, steady, frantic. Kieran leaned forward and pressed his forehead against Julian's stomach. It was a gesture of trust, a surrender. Julian let out a breath he felt he'd been holding for a decade. He covered Kieran's hand with his own. The world outside was cruel. The elites were vipers. But in this room, the viper had found his heart, and the wolf had found his sanctuary. And that is how the viper tamed the wolf. If you enjoyed seeing Julian destroy his enemies for Kieran, destroy that like button. And tell me in the comments, would you forgive the people who watched you suffer in silence, or would you burn them all down? I'll be reading your answers. Subscribe for the next chapter. Until then, prompt image. Prompt, masterpiece, best quality, high-res, 1.2. Korean manhwa style, semi-realistic, digital art. 2 men, BL, Yaoi, man 1. Julian, tall alpha, short black hair, sharp jawline, wearing unbuttoned white dress shirt with blood stains, glowing golden eyes, protective expression, kneeling on one knee. Man 2. Kieran, delicate omega, messy dark hair, pale skin, wearing oversized tuxedo jacket over wet clothes, bandage on neck, teary eyes, looking down at man 1, submissive but relieved. Background is a luxurious ballroom floor, scattered broken champagne glass, reflections on marble, dramatic lighting, cinematic composition, emotional atmosphere, intricate details.